Okay, so we're going to learn how to add an image into our sketch. Um, this is, a little bit like adding an image into an HTML page, but we actually have to do a little bit more work than just adding like the image tag with the source. So it's pretty simple, but there's a couple steps to it. So we can take a look at the documentation here in the P5 reference under image. There's a few different ways to do it. So we need the main function is just the image function, but you can see in these examples, there's a lot more happening besides just the image function that makes this work. Mainly, we just have to load this image. So when we're using an asset or a piece of media that's not just already part of our code, like a circle or a color or something like that, we need to load that asset before we start to draw it. And this is how most software works. Like when you're making a website, you just put the images where you want them to, but that's kind of obscuring the work that the browser is doing to make sure that those images are being loaded correctly. So P5 is doing most of this work for us, but we still have to tell P5 that we basically want to load the data from this image in order to render it. So that's what we're going to learn how to do. We're going to add a new function, which is the preload function, and this function actually occurs before our main setup function. So we'll see an example here. There's my cat, and that's pretty much what I need to do. So let's get this set up because using the P5 editor, there's a couple things that we're going to have to go over in order to get this to work in one of our projects. So first we need an actual image. And so I'm going to go over to Google and I'm just going to get an image just as to use as an example. But one thing I want to do, oh, I just Googled Google. That's not what I want. What do I want? Let's get an image of what's a good animal to do? Let's do like a fish. Uh, this is kind of funny. I guess it's because it's Halloween. All these like fish costumes are coming up here. Anyway, there's some good fish images in here. Let's go with, let's see. This one is pretty good. But actually, sorry, I got distracted. What I want to do before I download any of these images is make sure that they are not commercial images. So I'm going to go to Tools and Google Images and go to Usage Rights and then click on Creative Commons licenses. And so these are licenses that basically the person who published the image is allowing other people to use that image. So there's different types of Creative Commons licenses. Um, and some of them you have to give attribution, some of them you can't change the image, like there's different things, but most of them basically allow free use of the image in a project or something like that. Um, so let's find a cool fish. This is kind of a nice one. I guess this is like a clip art, or this one's pretty good actually. Let's get this. This is a good one. So this is from Wikimedia Commons. So they have a lot of Creative Commons stuff in here. We can go to their website and there's actually like different sizes of the image of this fish. So we probably don't really need a really big one. I'll get one that's a little bit smaller. So I'll get this like smaller copy of it. But we can also see information about the license here. So it says this is Creative Commons Share Alike 3.0. And what that means is that we're allowed to use it in a project, but there's a couple terms. So we can share the media, we can transform or adapt the media, but we have to give credit to the creator. So I'll make sure to include a link to the creator in my project. And then this one is actually a little bit more restrictive. So this is a 3.0 license. So also has a share alike restriction. So that means that I can't, if I use this image, I have to apply the same license to anything that I distribute with this image. So, since we're in a class, we're, students who are working on student projects, a lot of this stuff we don't really have to worry about because we're not trying to sell these things. We're not trying to make money off of these projects. But eventually, hopefully we will be making projects that exist in a commercial or distributed manner. And so it's good to be aware of these things as you're learning. So we want to make sure to look at the license before we use it. and follow the restrictions of the license. There's other licenses here. So like the Creative Commons website is a good place to kind of learn about what the different licenses are. And if you are making your own art, you might want to consider putting licenses on that art so that people, you know, will be, will use the license and hopefully respect the terms. Um, so anyway, so I've found this fish image that I want to use, and I've looked at the license, and so I'm going to download this image. And I could actually just use this URL. So I'm going to copy this URL and I'm going to paste it into my code up here just as a reference. So I could actually just load it directly from this URL. But I also want to show you guys that the file system that is available in the P5 editor. So I'm also going to download this file. And so in Chrome, if I want to download this, I can right click on it and just go to Save Image As. And I'm just going to put this in my Downloads folder for now. And then I'm going to load it from there in a second. So there's a couple different ways I can get this into my project, but I want to uh, make sure to download the original file. I usually like to download the original file because this URL might change, and so then you just lose it and you can't get it back necessarily. So it's better to just download the file so you don't have to worry about it disappearing. Uh, and let's see, I also need to give uh, attribution to this person who uploaded it. Although I'm confused about what they're, okay, this is the author and this is the description. So I'm just going to use the author's name and I'm going to link to this page. So if anybody wants to get the license, they'll be able to use it here. So I'm going to say fish image by, so this I'm attributing, I'm giving attribution to this person in my code. And then original, I'm just going to add a link to this file so people can go there to look at the license. And then I should also just like put a share alike license on here. So I'm just going to copy a link to this license and say shared under CC 3.0 and just put a little link there. So I'm kind of covering all my bases with that one. But there's different types of Creative Commons license. So you might find like a Creative Commons 0, in which case you don't actually have to do attribution or really do anything. So it's nice to do it even if they don't require it, but there's different types of licenses. Anyway, now that I've done all that, I can upload my image. So if I want to add an image to my project in the P5 editor, I'm going to go over to the sketch files area over here. So there's this little arrow button, and that shows me kind of my project files. And I can upload a file from my computer by clicking on here and go to upload file. And I can also create other files like a HTML or more JavaScript files there as well. And so I can drag and drop here, or I can just click and go to my downloads, and here's my fish image. And so I'm going to upload that. And there it is. It kind of has a long file name, so I'm going to rename it. And I'm just going to rename it fish.png. So it'll be easier to load into my project. So now I'll go back to sketch.js, and now I can load this image. So one more thing I have to do is make a reference to the image. So I'm going to say variable fish image. And I'm not going to assign this. So I need, if I want to draw my fish image in the draw function, I need it to exist both in the draw function and in this preload function that I'm about to make. So I need to make it a global variable. So now that I have a variable to put it in, I'm going to make a function preload. And what this function does, P5 calls this function, and it's going to load anything that we want to be loaded before it calls setup. So that way we know all of the pixels, all the color data from our image is available before we try to draw it. So I'm going to say fish image, and then this is easy. I'm just going to say equals load image. And now I just put the URL to the image. So I could, again, use this like Wikimedia URL, and that would work. So if I wanted to do that, I would just grab this. And this is a piece of data, so it's a text string. So I'd have to put it in quotation marks, and then I'll just paste it in there. So I could do it like that. and this should work. And then I just have to draw the image. So to draw an image, I just use the image function. And the first argument is the image data, which we've loaded in preload. So that's my fish image. And then the second argument, the next two arguments are just the position. So I'm going to do 0x, 0y for now. And hopefully we'll see that fish. There it is. So that looks pretty good. If I wanted to load just the file, I would just use the file path in my local system. So I renamed the image just fish.png. And so now it should still work, but now it's loading it from here. And you can also create folders and stuff. So if I made like an images folder, then I would have to put that. Like if I had a separate folder for images, I'd have to put that in the path as well. But for now, I just have one image, so I'm just going to leave it in the root directory. So there we go. There's my fish image. Pretty easy. And then I can kind of treat this image the way that I would treat a shape. Like I can change the position, I can change the scale, I can move it around. So let's look at a couple examples of things that I can do with the image. This actually I should take out because we're doing this all in P5 now. So let's ignore this. Oh yeah, all that stuff is not useful anymore. So here we go. So we have our image function, and so we can move the image around. So if I want to move the image with the mouse, I can say mouse X and mouse Y. And so now the image is going to follow my mouse. So I can make the image interactive, and you can see that by default, we're starting to draw the image from the top left corner. So if I wanted to change that, I can change the image mode like I have the rect mode. So I can say image mode is center, and this will center my image. So now the middle of the image is following the mouse. And it's a little laggy. I think it's kind of hard to tell, but I think it's already a little laggy. So it doesn't really like dealing with all this data. It's a lot more information than just drawing some circles and squares. Because there's a lot of, this is also like a very detailed image. There's a lot of colors in there. So that's going to take a little bit more time to render, but it's not too bad. So yeah, we can move the image around, and then we can also change the width and the height of the image. So I'm going to go back here and let's turn off center for a second, and let's put 0, 0 for X and Y, and then I'll use the mouse X for the width and mouse Y for the height. Now you can see that I'm actually manipulating the width and height of the image with my mouse instead of the position. So those arguments are optional. If we don't use those arguments, it's just going to draw the image at its native width and height, however many pixels the actual file has. So yeah, we don't have to have those in there, but if we want to play around with the size of the image, we can. So then we can also change the colors in the image. And this is where you're going to start to see the processing speed really take a dip, because doing this type of pixel manipulation, this is something that normally you would do in like Photoshop. So trying to do it every frame in P5, you probably see a little bit of a delay here. But if we want to change the image interactively, I could do a tint. So if I do tint, whoops, and I tint something like 255.00, what this is going to do is essentially it's going to multiply the color of what we're drawing in the image by these values. So the red will get higher, the blue and the green will go to 0. So see how now I have this red image where the parts that are more blue and green are completely black. So basically, it's a little more complicated than this, but essentially what's happening is for every pixel, every color in the image, it's taking the red value of that color and multiplying it by 255. And then it's doing the same thing for green and blue. And so we can see the result is that we have anything that's like has red in it, like white has some red in it, any red values are going to be completely red now. And anything that doesn't have any red in it is going to be black. So we could also add in, let's see what it looks like if I put some blue in there. So now we get reds and blues, but no greens. And so that's kind of cool. The performance actually isn't too bad right now. So maybe this computer is a little better than I thought. But yeah, you can see that we're manipulating the colors. There's a lot more that you can actually do with this kind of thing, with blend modes and stuff like that. So if you're interested in this type of like image processing, there's more you can do in P5 with that type of image processing. So then the cool thing, obviously, is that we could also use make this interactive as well. So I could say something like, map, let's say variable r equals map mouse x from 0 to width, and let's do 0 to 255. And then I'll put R in the tint, and now the pixels will actually be interactive. So we can see the tint color goes from just blue all the way over to adding the red in here. So the tint is kind of the way that we can manipulate the color values of an image. So another thing that we can do with an image, and I'm going to change this just a little bit. So let's just warp this image so it takes up the whole canvas. I'll say width and height for the image, and for the tint, let's turn this off just for a second. And then the image is a little distorted, so I'm going to make my canvas a bit bigger. Okay, there we go. So if we want to know the actual individual colors in the image, we can use the get value. So here you can see I'm getting the mouse X and mouse Y, and then using that to fill an ellipse. And so we can see that real quick. So this is basically just getting whatever the color value at this point is. So I'm going to say variable C for color is get mouse X, mouse Y. And then I'm just going to do a fill with that color. And I'm going to draw a nice big ellipse at mouse X, mouse Y. And what you're going to see here is that whatever color our mouse is currently on or above is what color the ellipse will be. So most of the time it's white, but when we're over here, we're filling in with the color of the fish. So that's kind of a cool effect, and there's a lot of stuff that you can do with that. Like you could add circles at a bunch of different points that have these colors and create kind of an effect like that. So you can do some of your own kind of like color processing with an image. And let's see, yeah, that's pretty much it. There's a lot more that you can do with images, and you can do this with other components as well. If you look at, is it under image? I think it's under, no, it's probably under render maybe. No, let's see. Let's just look blend. So yeah, you can do similar stuff to the tint with different blend modes. And that looks cool with images, but it actually applies to anything. So it's not really specific to images. But anyway, I think that's basically covers what I want to cover with images. Yeah, so for the meme assignment, you're going to want to combine an image with text. So hopefully you should have a good idea of how to do that. But basically, you can see we have this image example here, and I'll put a link to this in the chat now. I'll put one in the video as well, obviously. But if you want to combine this with one of your projects that has text, let's find our text example. Okay, so in our text example, pretty much we just take, the code from our text and dump it into our image project. And then you would get some, text superimposed over an image. So that's kind of the basic idea for this project. It's just starting to use media, which we'll do more of with sound in a bit. but also adding text into our project. So that's kind of really the basic idea. Anything, any ideas that you guys have, meme or logo is just kind of like a starting point. But if you have other thoughts about things that you would want to use, feel free to do anything that combines image and text. And for this first assignment, it's just a rough draft, so it doesn't have to be finished. It just kind of playing with images and text. And there's one other component, which is I want you to use two variables. So that shouldn't be too hard. If you're adding an image, you're going to need a variable for the image. So that's one already. And then if you're doing anything, with the text, you're probably going to end up using variables for the string that you're using, or if you're doing some kind of manipulation, you'll probably use variables in that part as well. So that's just one extra requirement, just so we get more comfortable using variables. So let's see, I'm going to stop recording.